Cold November rain swept through King's Cross Station, soaking the pavement where Iona Walker sat curled against the wall, her cardboard sign dissolving in the runoff. Commuters rushed past, bright coats, polished shoes, eyes that never lowered to her level. She had learned to disappear. Until a sound cut through the storm, the slow, impossible arrival of a midnight blue Rolls-Royce pulling directly in front of her. The door opened, and Iona's heartbeat stuttered. "Iona!" The voice was firm, unmistakable. Her grandmother, Eleanor Walker, a woman whose name carried weight across continents, stepped into the rain as if the world itself parted for her. Eleanor's gaze swept over Iona's thin frame, her trembling hands, her soaked clothes. Then her voice sharpened. "Where is the $80,000 I sent you?" Iona forced herself to stand, every muscle stiff with cold and humiliation. She lifted her chin, rain sliding down her face like a second set of tears. "You want your answer," she said, her voice cracking but steady. "Ask the woman getting into that limo. My stepmother. She stole everything." Eleanor's eyes shifted toward the idling limousine. Cold, focused, dangerous. Something in the air changed. People slowed. Phones lifted. A confrontation was coming, and no one could stop it now. What will a billionaire do when she learns her granddaughter was left to survive the streets alone? The rain thickened as Eleanor Walker's gaze followed the direction of Iona's trembling hand. The silver limousine idling across the plaza looked almost theatrical under the station lights, its polished surface reflecting the chaos it had caused without ever being touched by it. Eleanor stepped forward, her heels slicing through puddles as if the very ground owed her passage. Iona walked behind her, each step a quiet war between exhaustion and the first flicker of defiance she had felt in years. Adrian, Eleanor's longtime driver, knew her tone before she even spoke. He was already pulling the Rolls-Royce into motion, positioning it squarely in front of the limo. A few commuters stopped, sensing an explosion brewing beneath London's grey sky. Their murmurs softened into silence when the limousine door opened and Dana Rivera, Iona's stepmother, stepped out, draped in expensive wool polished gold earrings swaying as she adjusted her purse. She didn't see Iona at first. She saw Eleanor, wealth, prestige, and danger wrapped into one woman, and forced a bright, artificial smile. "Mrs. Walker," she said, extending her arms. "What a surprise. I didn't know you were in London." "Save your breath," Eleanor cut in. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried the force of someone who had never once begged to be heard. "Where is the money I sent for my granddaughter? And do not lie to me, Dana. Not today." Dana's smile sharpened. Then it faltered when she finally saw Iona, drenched, gaunt, unrecognizable from the vibrant girl she once knew. A flicker, shock or guilt, flashed across Dana's face before she smothered it. "Iona ran away," Dana replied, her tone shifting into practiced innocence. "She dropped out before classes even began. I tried to guide her, but she refused help. I had no choice but to." "You had no choice." Iona snapped, her voice raw, cracking, alive. "You stole everything. You locked me out of the house the week after Dad died. You took my documents. You blocked Nana's number. You told me to figure out life on my own. And you used the money meant for my future to send your daughter to college." Gasps rippled through the gathering crowd. A couple of people raised their phones. London rarely offered drama this expensive. Eleanor took one slow breath. That was more frightening than yelling. "Is this true?" she asked. Dana looked around desperately, calculating angles, searching for sympathy in a public that had already turned cold. "She's lying. You know how dramatic she can. Tell that to the cameras," someone muttered behind them. Adrian stepped closer, his presence solid and unmovable. "Ma'am," he said quietly to Eleanor, "should I call the police?" Dana's mask cracked. "You wouldn't," she hissed. "This is a family misunderstanding. It stopped being a misunderstanding when you left my granddaughter to die in the streets," Eleanor replied, every syllable steady. "You stole from the dead and from the living. For the first time since Iona had pointed across the plaza, Dana's composure splintered. Her voice rose in frantic waves, tangling around excuses. But she couldn't outrun the truth anymore. Not with Iona standing there in soaked clothes and hollowed cheeks, not with commuters watching and recording, not with Eleanor's eyes dissecting every lie. When the police arrived, their assessment was immediate. Iona's documents weren't just missing, they were found minutes later in Dana's purse, tucked in an inner compartment she hadn't zipped fully. It was enough to confirm Iona's story before any paperwork was pulled. Dana's face drained as the officers asked her to step aside. Her voice pitched into panic, echoing across the plaza as she shouted for her lawyer, for her daughter, for anyone who might tell this story differently. But London wasn't listening to her anymore. Iona watched as the woman who had stripped her of everything was placed in handcuffs. Rain streaked down Dana's cheeks, smudging expensive makeup into dark lines. She turned once toward Iona, perhaps searching for mercy, perhaps calculating how to twist this later. But Iona had nothing left to give her. No anger, no forgiveness, no fear. Only absence. The officers read Dana her rights. She screamed until the door of the police car shut her voice out entirely. The plaza quieted. The storm didn't. Eleanor stepped closer to Iona, and for the first time in years, Iona didn't flinch from touch. Her grandmother's hand rested on her shoulder, not heavy, not fragile, but present. "Come with me," Eleanor said. "We're going to the hospital first." Iona expected the warmth of the Rolls-Royce to feel foreign, but it felt like oxygen entering the lungs after years of holding her breath. Eleanor spoke in low, controlled tones, not about money or failure, but about responsibility, about how she would make this right, about how she should have searched sooner. Iona listened without answering. She didn't know yet how to process softness. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights revealed truths Iona had learned to ignore. The jut of her collarbones, the gray cast beneath her eyes, the bruises she no longer remembered receiving. Doctors moved with calm urgency. Words like malnutrition, dehydration, and organ stress came and went. Eleanor stood in every doorway, absorbing every update like a woman preparing to tear down the world brick by brick. The first night, Iona woke up gasping, thinking she was under the bridge again. But this time someone was sitting beside her. Eleanor didn't speak. She simply stayed. Recovery wasn't beautiful. It wasn't cinematic. But it was hers. Weeks later, when Iona stepped onto the campus of the London School of Economics, she expected to feel like an intruder. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt since her father was alive. A beginning. Classes challenged her mind the way survival had challenged her body. She struggled. She excelled. She cried in the library once after receiving her first A-, not because of the grade itself, but because someone had taken her mind seriously again. Months turned into semesters. She made friends, slowly, cautiously, then fully. She joined study groups. She worked late nights in computer labs. She relearned how to be a person who looked forward instead of backward. The emotional waves didn't disappear. Some nights, she walked past King's Cross Station just to remind herself that she had survived it. The memory didn't crush her. It grounded her. Then came the trial. Eleanor sat beside her as Dana's long list of crimes unfolded before the court. Identity theft, fraud, forgery, coercion, reckless endangerment. Dana tried charm. Then tears. Then anger. None of it mattered. Iona testified with quiet strength. She didn't embellish. She didn't dramatize. She told the truth. And the truth was heavy enough to break the courtroom. When the judge delivered the sentence, 6 years with no early release, it wasn't cruel. It was correct. Iona didn't smile. But something unknotted inside her. By her final year at LSE, Iona had become a name on campus. A student who excelled with a kind of purpose that turned heads. Professors invited her into research projects. Firms quietly inquired about her future plans. The girl who once begged for spare coins now debated economic policy in packed lecture halls. The day she graduated, Eleanor stood in the front row wearing a deep green suit that shimmered under the hall lights. When Iona crossed the stage and shook the dean's hand, applause thundered. Not polite but proud. Later in the car, Eleanor handed her an envelope. Inside was a fellowship offer in New York, studying economic inequality and urban policy. Fully funded. Iona breathed in slowly. "Do you think I'm ready?" she asked. Eleanor looked at her the same way she had the night at King's Cross, except this time, her eyes held pride instead of horror. "You were ready long before the world realized it." But the most powerful moment came weeks later. Iona was walking past King's Cross again when she saw a young woman huddled beneath the same awning where she once sat. The girl's sign was smudged, her hands trembling. "Anna, stop." She crouched down. She offered her a warm drink, a business card, and the promise of help. Not charity but a path. The girl whispered, Why would you help me?" Iona answered with a softness forged from years of storms. "Because someone should have helped me sooner. And because you deserve better than the world has given you." The rain lifted. The city moved on. But Iona remained steady, rooted, rising. She didn't just reclaim her life. She built a future strong enough to confront the past without being defined by it. And Dana. 6 years in prison stripped her reputation, her wealth, her fabricated social circle. Her daughter refused to visit. Her name became synonymous with betrayal in every article written about her case. By the time she was released, there was no empire left to rebuild, no audience left to manipulate, no one eager to forget what she had done. Justice didn't just reach her. It reshaped her world completely. And Iona walked forward, knowing that sometimes justice moves slowly, but when it finally arrives, it arrives unmistakably. So what happens when someone tries to destroy another person's future? Sometimes the universe makes sure they lose their own. In the months that followed, Iona moved through the world with a steadiness she had never known. New doors opened, not because life suddenly became kind, but because she no longer carried the weight of someone else's lies. She learned to breathe without waiting for the next blow, to trust the ground beneath her even when the memories tried to shake it loose. And slowly, she understood something she hadn't been able to see in the chaos. Truth doesn't erase the past, but it gives you the power to rise above it. The day she received her fellowship letter, she stood by her window and watched the city glow. It wasn't the skyline that held her attention. It was the feeling that she had finally stepped into a life that belonged to her, shaped by her own hands rather than the shadows of others. Strength hadn't arrived in one moment. It had grown quietly, the way light returns after a long storm. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this journey wasn't just survival. It was transformation. If this story spoke to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales so more people can discover stories that inspire, heal, and remind us of our own resilience.